Now we're going to talk a little bit about the Dudaei Reuven on Parashas Yisro. We're talking about the 10 Commandments. So the 10 Commandments, what was given on Mount Sinai, it's not 100% clear what was given. Was it just the 10 Commandments? Was it certain passages of the Torah? Like it says, this passage of the sabbatical year. Was it the entire Torah? This is the dispute within the Talmud in Tractate Gittin. Also, the end of Mishpatim, it says Sefer Mishpatim, but there is a fundamental dispute. Some say that the entire oral law was given at Mount Sinai, including that which students are, all the chidushim that students are coming up with even today in our base medrash, even our Zoom-based medrash, even those chidushim, when you bring an idea into our discussion and you inspire us with your new idea, even that was included on Mount Sinai. So in that context, let's go into the Dudaei Reuven. The Dudaei Reuven asks the question. He cites the way the Dudaei Reuven always works. He always cites several midrashim on the portion. So he starts by saying that it says in our portion that Moshe went up to the mountain, and God called him from the mountain, and he said to him, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, Ko Tomaro Beit Yaakov." Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob. If I'm not mistaken, that this is the yahrzeit, this Shabbos is the yahrzeit for the Dudaei Reuven's mother, who was daughter of the Maskil Eitan. So it should be a slus for her neshama. Now, whatever we study today should be a slus for the neshama of the Dudaei Reuven's mother, the Maskil Eitan. So he's the daughter of the Maskil Eitan. So Moshe went up the mountain, and God called out to him from the mountain. He said, "Thus he shall say to the house of Jacob, V'tagedu b'nei Yisrael, and say to the sons of Israel, you saw that which I did to Egypt, and I will lead you on the wings of Nisharim," typically translated as eagles, "and I'll bring you to me. And if you listen to my voice and you guard my commandment, you will be for me a treasure from all the nations. Because to me is the whole earth. And you will be for me a mamlechet kohanim, a priestly nation, and a nation of priests and a holy nation. These are the matters that you shall speak to the children of Israel." So what is that? So those are the verses. So the Midrash comes along and says, what does this mean? These are the matters. Don't do any less and don't do any more. That you shall speak to the children of Israel in this manner. This Midrash is strange. What does it mean? Don't do any less, don't do any more, and only speak in this manner. This is strange. What does that mean? And what does it say in the middle? That you'll be a kingdom of priests. What does it mean? And why does it start to say this will be the house of Jacob and the children of Israel? So the Midrash says, what does it mean, the house of Jacob? This refers to the women. The children of Israel, this refers to the men. Why are women come first? So that they should teach their children Torah. And so the Talmud says that God said, when I created the world, first I commanded Adam, and then I commanded Chava. So it's the opposite of when the world was created. But now he says, if I don't teach the women first, they're going to miss out on the Torah studies. Therefore, first it says Beit Yaakov, which, by the way, Beit Yaakov is a whole system of schools for girls. And then say to them the beginning of things that they could hear and teach their children and the men, and then teach them those things that they can understand. So that's what the Midrash says. Then there's another Midrash which says, God said to Moshe, go tell the people, sanctify yourselves today and also tomorrow. And then the Midrash tells us, is a complicated Gemara in Shabbos 87a. Shabbos 87a is where we have the whole discussion of what happened at Mount Sinai. There it says that Moshe came and added on a day on his own. And when Moshe added on a day on his own, meaning to say they had to separate 2 days before Sinai, Moshe came and added on a day on his own. That was the third day. And God came and agreed with him. It says in the Midrash that God agreed with him. So the Hiskim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Imo. So the Dudaei Reuven asks a very simple question. Very, very simple question. Well, if God's agreeing with him, why didn't God just say this at the beginning? Why is God agreeing with him? Why didn't God just say separate for 3 days at the beginning? And then he has, as is the style of the Dudaei Reuven, he has around 5 or 6 additional midrashim, which we're not going to go through all of them, but I'll just do one more, which is fundamental. Before we make his point, he says a fundamental point. He says in the Talmud, as I said in Gittin, the Gemara discusses how the Torah was given at Sinai. Rabbi Yochanan teaches that Gittin 68, that when God made a covenant with the Jewish people, he made it over the oral law. It says, and it cites the verse, on the basis of these teaching, I made a covenant with Israel. And so the Dudaei Reuven says, why is that a reference to the oral law? That's said in the context of write all of these words. On the basis of these words, I made a covenant, which implies that that's not the oral law, that that's the written law. So therefore, how is Rabbi Yochanan learning out from this the oral law? And that's the question that he has. So these are 3 questions. And again, the question before is why did Moshe have to come up with this idea on his own? Why couldn't God have said it? And why is the oral law considered the law that was written? And so I'll just add one more very well-known midrash, which is Shabbos 88a, which the Dudaei Reuven says that Moshe held the mountain over their head, and he said, and when he held it over their head, he said, if you accept it, good, and if not, here will be your burial places. And so the Gemara says, why? So the Dudaei Reuven says, what do you mean if you accept it? They already said that they're going to accept it at that point. What does it mean? So he says, what he's saying is, if you accept the oral law. By the way, I just want to say as a tangent, where we think is Mount Sinai, which is Jebel Harb, it fits very well with this midrash. Because Jebel Harb in southern Saudi Arabia is a very wide mountain with a low plateau, but then there's a very, very high peak, which traditionally they say nobody's ever climbed. So this peak could be the part that was held over their heads. Anyway, so what does it mean that they didn't accept the Torah? They'd already said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will accept and we will do. So what does it mean? He says that if you accept it over your heads, here, if you accept it well and good, otherwise here will be your burial place. So here comes the point of the Dudaei Reuven, as he cites all these midrashim which talk about why did Moshe have to come up with it on their own? Why is the written Torah, why is the oral Torah considered written? Why is the fact that even after they said we're going to accept the Torah, that they have to accept the Torah? He makes the basic point, and his basic point is something that I think everybody has to remember. A lot of people like to say, oh, I accept the written Torah, but the oral Torah, the rabbis, that's not for me. I accept the written Torah, but what are the rabbis? Where is it written? He says, no, the only way you can accept the written Torah is with the oral Torah. The oral Torah is the essential way. It's not an additional way. It's not an additional aspect to the written Torah. It is the way to read the written Torah. It's the only way the written Torah makes sense. You can't understand. We start off our discussion today by talking about the pre-Eitz Hadar, which we said is an etrog. The only way we know that the pre-Eitz Hadar is an etrog, is from the oral law. The only way we know what the tefillin look like is from the oral law. The oral law is not something separate from the written Torah. It's part and parcel of the written Torah. And that's the whole concept here. That's why it says it's written. The oral law, it's like it's written. It's like it's part, it's completely part of it. These are the words of the Dudaei Reuven. He says there are not 2 Torahs. There's not an oral Torah and a written Torah. Bemet ein zeh shtei Torot, rak Torah achat. There's only one Torah, and everything is hinted to in the written Torah. There aren't 2 Torahs. There's one Torah. It's all written in there. And there are 304,805 letters of the Torah, but the space between the letters is also written in the Torah, and that's the point. So that's why it says in the Gemara in Eruvin, 21a, that the rabbis used to expound every single quotes. Quotes is like a point. Every single point, mounds and mounds of halachot. That whatever was said, and that's why the Ramban writes in his introduction to the Torah that everything that was said in a prophecy was all received by Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai. All was said to Moses through his gates of understanding, and everything was written there. Everything with either with hint, the gematria, all of this. That when Moshe went up to heaven, he found God that was tying knots on the letters. God was writing the crowns on the letters. And a person said to him, what are you going to do with all these crowns? Why are you making crowns on each of the letters? So that we have to do it on what's called Shatnei Scots and Bedek Chaya. We have to write letters on the following crowns on the following letters. Shin, Ayin, Tes, Nun, Zayin, Gimel, Tzadi. That's called Shatnei Scots. And also Bedek Chaya. Beis, Daled, Kuf, Ches, Yud, Hey. They all have crowns on them. Why are you making crowns on all these letters? So he says he said, because there's a person who's going to come along, and that's Rabbi Akiva, who's going to expound each and every one of these letters. And indeed, the Gemara in Tainis 9a says, is there anything that's not hinted to in the Torah? We have a principle that every single letter is hinted to already in the Torah. And so therefore, that we see from here that the Dudaei Reuven is saying, it's not the oral law and the written Torah. The only way we can understand the written Torah is with the oral law, which was given at Sinai. That's a fundamental principle of our faith, And that is axiomatic, because if we don't accept the oral law, we really have nothing. And that's why, I'm just going to put this out there. If you have some liberal strains of Judaism that try to knock down the oral law, you might be able to get your way on one law or two law, but in the end, everything will crumble. Every single thing will crumble. If we don't accept the concept that the oral law is as holy as the written law, we are left with nothing. And think about that well. We'll stop the recording here and take some questions. Yes, Nancy.